Hi everyone, welcome to week 8 of our Comp 1 class. This week's intro video is probably going to be a bit longer than some of my previous videos, just because I want to take some time to walk you through some of the activities in a little bit more detail. Here on our overview for week 8, you'll see a bit of a summary of what we're going to be doing. And there's a reminder here that we have tutoring services available through the online writing center. I believe in a previous video that I sent out, I gave instructions on how to access that tutoring. But if you need help finding that video again or need a different explanation for how to access NetTutor, just let me know and I'll be happy to walk you through that. The online tutoring is a really good resource for you, and they can help you out with just about any aspect of the writing process. All right, let's go ahead and go on to our first task here. Task 8.1, you have some readings from your textbook. The first section here, and actually you'll see that both of these, it is recommended that you skim them. This would be quite a lot of reading for you to read all of this. And frankly, some of the information in these chapters you just won't need. So skim through these, get an idea of what each chapter talks about, and then if you need the information, you can go back and take a look at it later. These first three readings are providing tips about how to organize your writing. So we have a section on reporting information, a section on arguing a position, and a section on reflections. And then these next four, these focus on MLA mostly. So how to quote, paraphrase, and summarize, how to acknowledge sources properly and avoid plagiarism, a chapter here on documentation, so like documenting your sources, citing things correctly, and then also a chapter on MLA. Moving on. Task 8.2 is your first assignment this week that you'll be turning in. This is an activity where you will be synthesizing your sources. The word synthesis, if you aren't familiar with it, to synthesize something usually means that you are taking information from multiple places. So in this case, you will be using sources. You've been doing research, you found sources that you think are going to be helpful, and each of those sources has its own information. But you're going to take all of that information and sort of put it all together, figure out how the different pieces fit together, almost like a puzzle, in order to say something new or interesting or insightful. So to put it perhaps a little bit more simply, it's where you take multiple sources of information, put them together to say something else. That's what synthesis is. And the activity here is going to kind of walk you through that process. To do this, you will need to download the chart that is right here, and I'll show you that in a second. Keep in mind that you are going to need 3 to 5 sources for this project. It's up to you to decide how many you think you actually need, but you need to have a minimum of 3. And we have a tip here. You can take a look at how other students in the past have completed this assignment. But let's take a look. I have it pulled up here. So this could potentially be a little bit confusing at first glance. But what you're doing is in each of these boxes, you should write the author's name, title, and any other identifying information you have for your sources. So you'll put that in each of these boxes, source 1, source 2, and so on. And then for each of these boxes, you'll look up to see what it's asking you to write down. So here we have how this source relates to my question. So source 1, you're going to write in this box how source 1 relates to your question. This next box for source 1, we're going to go look up here, how info from this source relates to my own experiences, observations, etc. So you'll write that in this box, and so on. So for each of these boxes, you'll need to fill out, and these boxes up here tell you what needs to go in that slot, and you will repeat that for each of your 3 to 5 sources. Okay, moving on. Task 8.3 is you developing a tentative thesis statement. You will be sharing that thesis statement in a discussion board post that is due Wednesday, if I'm not mistaken. And I will be giving each of you feedback on your thesis statements. And let's see here if there's anything else I need to point out. Oh, your thesis statement for this project is going to be your answer to your research question. So your research question isn't a thesis because a thesis always needs to be a statement. Questions and statements are different things. But whatever your answer is to your question, that is going to be your thesis. So, for instance, I know one of you has a research question: how did COVID-19 impact your community? So that's the research question, and your thesis would be COVID-19 impacted my community by blah, blah, blah. So, whatever you found through your research, that's going to be your thesis statement. Let's see here. There's a note here. Usually it takes several tries to get a thesis statement that will work for your paper. Um, I recommend jotting down several. Try to get, 3, 4, 5 thesis statements. And even if they're all kind of saying the same thing, but are just worded a little bit differently, that's still a good process for you to go through. It's still you thinking through your ideas and playing around with wording and getting something that's going to fit right for what you're trying to accomplish. So don't go with just the first thesis you come up with. Try to come up with several. Task 8.4 is creating an outline or some other plan for your draft. Now, this is perhaps a bit complicated. Um, in the readings from task 8.1, there were some different methods that you could use for organizing your paper. And the method that you choose is just going to depend on your topic and sort of how you wish to present the information and what you're trying to accomplish through the project. So some things to do, you will want to consider, what is your purpose? What are you trying to accomplish? Who exactly is your audience? Who is going to be reading your document, and also who is the ideal person to be reading it. So just because I'm going to be grading your paper doesn't necessarily mean that I am your audience. You can potentially have a different audience, a different kind of group of people that you're trying to reach through your writing. And as well as just any sort of context that goes along with it. So you'll be considering these three things and maybe other things when you decide how you want to go about organizing this project. Let's see here. So some potential organizational patterns. You can do an argument-based pattern. I imagine that this is what a lot of people will do. So if your main purpose is to persuade your audience, then an argument-based structure might be the way to go. Such a structure might look like the example flowcharts in the Norton Field Guide on page 179. So you can go there to get an example of what that might look like. You will probably have your thesis in the introduction, which is what we've been doing so far in this class. You'll probably want to explain your personal connection to the research question fairly early in your paper. So that would either be in your intro or maybe in your first body paragraph. You would organize your body paragraphs around reasons, reasons for why you are answering your question the way that you are. So you have your research question. Your thesis is going to be the answer to that question, and then each of your supporting points will be reasons for why you have the stance that you do. So to go with the previous example that I gave you, if your research question is how did COVID-19 impact my community, your thesis statement would be maybe something like COVID-19 impacted my community by X, Y, and Z. And then X, Y, and Z would be your main reasons that are explaining and supporting your thesis statement. This is the pattern that you most likely followed for writing project 2. Let's see here. Here's an important note. Your So writing project 4 is primarily exploratory. And actually, I think that might be a typo. I think this is meant to say writing project 3. Yeah, so writing project 3 is primarily exploratory, which means that you don't have to have a definitive answer to your research question. You aren't really proving anything. Now, you can, if you want to take a firm stance, if you want to try and prove that you are correct about something, you can, but you don't have to. This project is allowed to be what we call exploratory, which is where you are exploring your thoughts, exploring your response to something. We have a couple of other patterns here that you might follow. A report-based pattern. This would be good for you if your purpose is to inform your audience. So if you're not really presenting an argument, you're more just presenting information, you could do that. And this paragraph here talks you through that a little bit. And then also a reflection-based pattern. So if your main goal is to prompt your readers to reflect on your question, you may want to choose this pattern. And again, this paragraph will talk you through that a little bit, and you should see this section in the textbook. Read through that section in the textbook, and it will talk you through what it means to write a paper in that style, and will give you some useful examples. The final pattern is this one right here, IMRAD, which honestly I would not recommend that you do. This is a very, very specific way of writing a paper. You usually write this sort of paper if you are doing like hands-on research, or what we might call field research. So if you were conducting interviews, passing out a survey, if you did like an actual science experiment, you would probably use this type of organizational pattern and style. But I'm guessing most people are going to be developing their thesis just based on sources that they found through the library or for Google, through Google. And so this organizational pattern doesn't work super well for that type of research. So I would probably only use this organizational pattern if you are already pretty familiar with it, and you were doing this kind of research. Otherwise, I would probably just ignore this. Let's see here. So once you have considered these different methods of organization, you will create an outline. How you do that is largely up to you. I just need to see that you have some sort of organizational pattern, that you have selected some kind of method to organize your paper. You are going to also make a post about your outline to the discussion board. Let's see, moving on. 8.5a, learning how to acknowledge sources. In this paper, you'll need to make sure that you are using in-text citations and also using a works cited page. And the chapters that I asked you to read or skim over in 8.1 go into a lot of detail about MLA. So this task is mostly just reminding you about the need to use MLA formatting and correct citations in this upcoming paper. Here you'll find a note about signal phrases. I would read over that. And here is a video about in-text citations as well. Now let's take a look at 8.5b. Computer's going a little bit slow. There we go. So this task is reminding you about some important things in regards to creating a works cited page. Your works cited page is going to be the last page of your paper. It needs to be labeled works cited, just like this. It doesn't need to be bold or italicized or underlined. You should have a total of 3 to 5 sources. And a lot of you will be using articles that you found through a database. So this is how you do that citation. And actually, these should have hanging indents. I will go back in and edit this and see if I can change this. But here's an example of how you cite an article from an online database. So most things that you find through the library will be cited like this. Down here, here's a reminder that the Norton Field Guide provides really all of the examples and explanations you could ever need for correctly citing sources. And it's organized in a way that is very easy to navigate. So you can just look up what kind of source you're trying to cite and then go to that page and they'll show you how to do it. Here's a video about works cited pages. And then here's another one that can provide some more practice and guidance for works cited pages. Task 8.6, these are your discussion board posts. Your first one is due by 11:59 on Wednesday. You should post your thesis statement and also share any concerns you have about your thesis statement. And I will be replying to these and giving you my feedback. By Friday, you should respond to at least 2 of your classmates' posts, telling them what you think about their thesis statement and if you think their thesis is effective for this type of assignment. Your second post is due on Friday. You will be sharing what kind of organizational pattern you are going to be using. You need to explain why, and also talk about any concerns you have for your outline or organizational plan. And then here's just a reminder, need to make sure that you reply to at least 2 of your peers. So you can reply to any of their posts, you can reply to their thesis posts, you can reply to their organization post, whichever you like. Okay, and so this week you have several things to submit. You'll be submitting the writing that you did for task 8.2, which was synthesizing your sources, 8.3, which is your thesis statement, and 8.4, which is your outline. Make sure that you submit all of these things. Preferably, I would have you submit it in one document, but if you don't, that's not a big deal. Do make sure that each section is clearly labeled so that I can tell which is which. All right, that is it for week 8. If you have any questions, just let me know.